Day 1. There's a fine line between the perception of coincidence and intent when it comes to a series of unfortunate events. 3 dead fiancés, 2 lost sweethearts, and a few mutilated flirts tended to slip from the realms of coincidence and into that of deliberate misadventure, thought King Markon. The fiancés, sweethearts, and flirts were not his. They belonged, or had belonged, to his son, Prince Parrin. King Markon sighed. It had been easy to dismiss the first fiancé as dreadful happenstance. The child had fallen from a horse, after all. And the second, a younger princess from the neighbouring kingdom, had been attacked by bandits in her own lands. At first, the danger had only been to fiancés. Then, as Markon grew wise to the problem and discouraged immediate thoughts of marriage, Parrin's sweethearts began to have unfortunate accidents as well. Parrin fell in love so quickly, even for a boy of 20, that it was hard to keep the girls out of danger. It wasn't until Parrin's first sweetheart vanished without a trace that the murmurs began. To Markon's astonishment, the murmurs only doubled the interest in his son. It was spoken in whispers around the kingdom that any woman who freed the prince from his curse, be she shepherdess or princess, would marry the prince and be queen in the course of time. The first 3 girls could be blamed on the curse, if curse there was. The others, thought Markon, with a surge of sudden distaste for himself, could only be laid at his door. He'd heard the rumours, and instead of squashing them, he'd allowed them to run their course, hoping that one of the girls would be able to break the curse. There hadn't been any shortage of them, and he'd personally vetted the few determined young women who pretended to be Parrin's fiancées after the real ones died. Each of those young ladies had died, disappeared, or been injured grievously within a week of being affianced to Parrin. King Markon pulled distractedly at the silvering hair at his temples. There was a lot more of it there lately, along with a suspicious thinning of hair at the top of his head. Stress, Parrin told him. Markon was more inclined to think that he was simply getting old. Still, the stress didn't help, and now his steward had come to him with the unwelcome news that an enchantress had come to try her luck at the curse. On the one hand, thought Markon, struggling to decide if he should allow the enchantress to do her best, or if he should send her safely on her way, an enchantress really ought to be able to take care of herself. On the other, the curse's latest victim was a poor noble maiden who had merely chanced to catch Parrin's eye and exchange a flirtatious smile with him. Markon wasn't sure the unfortunate girl's hair would ever regrow. That was the sort of thing a woman took seriously, enchantress or not. The steward, who'd been waiting with commendable patience while his master thought the matter through, ventured to say politely, "Sire, should I bid the enchantress enter?" "Why not?" said Markon tiredly. The only other option was to lock Parrin in his suite, where unwary damsels wouldn't catch his eye. "Send her in." He was gazing out the window when the steward announced, "Althea of Avernse, your majesty." Markon turned his head to meet a dark blue pair of eyes that were quiet, shuttered, and surprisingly sharp. The owner of those eyes curtsied in a short, precise manner, her gaze never leaving him, and then folded her hands in front of her. She was less enchantressy than Markon expected. Part of that, he was ruefully aware, was because he was getting rather old, and Althea looked ridiculously young. The other part of it was the sensible well-cut frock of blue cotton that had not a glitter of the kind of decorative magical furbelows that enchantresses usually sported. Her back was as straight as a poker, prim and no nonsense, and her hair was braided to within an inch of its life, without so much as daring to curl at her temples, though it was plainly aching to do so. Markon thought of the little countess sprawled in the courtyard at her horse's feet, the weaver's daughter and her horror at her severed hand, and the 2 lost ladies. He said instinctively, "I'm sorry, but we're no longer accepting applications." Her head jerked back, surprise and, was that annoyance, on her face? It was gone almost immediately. Althea's eyes narrowed on him in distinct interest. "Is that so? I was under the impression that the curse was still very much in effect." "It is." "I see." Althea let the words hang in the air, turning over her own thoughts, and Markon, who should have called back the steward and had him show the child out, simply watched her think. She was too old for Parrin, of course, by a good 5 years or so. "And far too young for you," thought Markon, startling himself with the direction his thoughts had taken him. Besides, an older woman might be just the thing for the boy.